We have about 20 people in the room. It feels good to be in person, so a warm welcome to everybody here. We want to focus in on GA4 and some of the changes that Google Analytics is making as they move from session-based to reporting. So what does that mean to marketers? How's that going to affect your reporting? That's what we're here to discuss. And we're going to talk about how things have changed, answer some of your questions along the way. Our speaker today loves analytics. He geeks over numbers, and he's here today. He's a consultant from Wider Group. So he works really closely with clients and our web team, and he can answer some questions. Please welcome Kevin Zies.
Thank you very much, Mary. So as Mary mentioned, my name is Kevin Zies. Thrilled to be here today. I joined Wider Group as a June. Previously, I was with PR 2020, which is another digital marketing inbound agency that was known for being HubSpot's first ever agency partner. So there's quite a bit of history in the companies that I've worked with, and I'm thrilled to be a part of Wider Group now. I've got more than 20 years worth of experience working across a number of disciplines, media relations, fundraising and development, recruitment marketing, corporate communications, as well as turning my attention now to the consulting side. So been a lot of experience that I've had throughout the years, and in each stop that I've had, I've been pretty extensively, so enjoy doing this. I'm actually based out of Cleveland, Ohio, so I'm here today, not unfamiliar. I lived in Milwaukee for a couple of years out of college, and excited to be back here in Badger State. And while I enjoy all aspects of helping, I do have a special fondness, as I mentioned, for analytics. I've been working in analytics for over 15 years now. And so I'm really happy to be able to share some of my knowledge with you all today. So to begin with, there's 4 key takeaways that I'd like you to come away from. First is a deeper understanding of what exactly is Google Analytics and how it can be used to benefit your business. The second is what is different about the current iteration of Google Analytics called Universal Analytics and the upcoming change to GA4. The impact that these changes will have on metrics within HubSpot. And finally, GA4's impact on goal setting for your 2023 KPI inbound KPIs, sorry. So what exactly is Google Analytics? Now, a lot of the clients that I've worked with in the past have always sort of had a mystery about Google Analytics. It's not some magical thing. A lot of people don't really understand and have a lacking of the end of what it is and how it can be used to leverage, or how it can be leveraged to help their business. So we're going to start by kind of demystifying what exactly Google is. Put simply, it's a tool that you can use to help understand the way that your customers interact with your website. It measures how you're, and it measures what they do once they enter your site, what pages they visit, how long they're there, and ultimately when they leave. Important is what Google Analytics is, though, is what it is not. It is not a single source of truth for your website. It is not the end-all, be-all behind your inbound marketing activities. You should still continue to use reporting tools that are available to you in conjunction with Google Analytics in order to make the best decisions for your business. Along those lines, Google Analytics cannot tell you what changes to make or how to make those changes. It requires you to do those pieces on your own. It is simply to help you make the best decisions possible for your business. So Google's current interface is called Universal. This has been around since 2005. It has been, the piece that people have gotten to know over the years. Time for people to have understanding how the platform works, and it's a long time for the amount of data to have been collected over the years. So coming up, most people, I would assume, know at this point that Universal Analytics is being retired. They're going to stop collecting data. For most people, this is going to be July 1st of next year. And so what that means is all of that historical data that you've collected, it'll be stored for a while, but it's not really going to help because the new metrics that are being captured aren't going to match up the existing platform. So One of the biggest limitations that Google Analytics has is that it cannot reverse engineer data. It cannot tell you information about your site prior to being installed on the site. So the earlier that you've gotten your GA up, the more data you're going to have. But if you don't have it set up currently and you're waiting until July 1st, you will have no historical data with which to make a comparison. So that's why we've been working with our clients to make sure that they're transitioning over to Google Analytics 4 as soon as possible so that they do have some library of data moving forward as opposed to just coming into July 1st on a clean slate. So because Universal Analytics processing, these two systems are totally separate from each other. And get myself a little bit ahead of myself here. So yes, the sooner that it's set up, the more historical data that you'll have at your disposal. So with a firm end date now in Google Analytics to be collecting data, it's really important to understand what the two differences are between Universal Analytics and GA4. So we're going to take a little peek behind some of these foundational differences that are in store. To begin with, still collecting data regarding who's visiting your site and how they're getting there. Those are the core purposes behind any analytics tool, not just Google Analytics, not just HubSpot's reporting tool, but they're there to try to help you make decisions around your website. GA4 was actually originally created to track both websites and apps for mobile apps. As people began developing apps, they realized that collecting app data was different from collecting website traffic. That if we've all accidentally dialed somebody with a phone in our pocket. Well, how many times and you're on an app that you didn't intend to open up? Well, that doesn't really count because it's not really an engagement. You're not engaged with the app. So that's a big part of what GA4 represents moving forward. There is no longer a need to track just sort of the general site visits. And site visits and sessions aren't really a valid metric anymore because of that ability to just sort of open up something on accident. So this entire thing represents a different shift in terms of a philosophy in the way that core metrics are presented. In Universal Analytics, metrics were presented in terms of visitor sessions and number of page views. In GA4, these interactions, as Mary mentioned in the introduction, these are reported in terms of events and parameters. And so these results show up in two different interpretations of data. And so it's based more upon the key metrics that should matter to your business as opposed to what we typically like to refer to metrics that may look good, but don't really mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. So here's an example of this philosophical change. This screen is from Universal Analytics and showing the base user acquisition overview report. Your standard classifications sides, acquisition and behavior. So what it is, how are people getting to your site, and what are they doing when they're there? From there, acquisition is users, new users, and sessions, while behavior is split into your bounce rate, pages per session, and average session durations. Many marketers kind of got sidetracked over the course of time, focusing on some of these metrics that don't really matter a whole lot. A lot of people that years have gotten very fascinated with bounce rate, trying to keep their bounce rate as low as possible. And that became almost individuals and companies. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the question remains, does that really matter? The answer is no, because with GA4, that metric has now changed. We're no longer looking just at the bounce rate of who's coming to your site and leaving. Who's coming to your site and doing something while they're there? We want to make sure that we're measuring engagements. So the same report now, base user acquisition report with GA4. You'll see that the split of acquisition and behavior is gone. Instead are different categories. New users, engaged sessions, engagement rate, engaged sessions per user, and average engagement time. We're going to take a little bit of a look at these closer. So new users is exactly what it would seem like. And it's the same thing as it was in Universal Analytics, the visitors to your site. Engaged sessions, though, is where we start to differ. And these are the people who may meet one of several criteria as an engaged session. They can either last more than 10 seconds on your site. They can have a conversion event, such as clicking on a link or other actionable item, or they view 2 or more page views during their session. This is the effect of filtering out the traffic that just pops on, immediately decides this isn't what I'm looking for, and goes elsewhere. So it's only measuring the traffic that you're focusing on, instead of worrying about those people that aren't meaningful and aren't relevant for your business. Your engagement rate then, number of engaged sessions divided by the total number of sessions, and engaged sessions per user, fairly self-explanatory. Average engagement time is essentially the length of time that the page was viewed. It's basically your session duration from Universal Analytics, but it's only measuring those sessions, not all sessions, not all users there. So again, these are sort of those metrics that matter as just the base. So if we go back to our Universal Analytics example, is it really important to know how many pages that a visitor reads on your site? Or is it more important to be able to track the activity that they're taking while they're on your site? To our core question. Doesn't it make sense to track only the traffic that is actively engaged with your site, actively engaged with you as a business? That's the philosophical shift that is represented by the change to GA4. It's less of a focus on quantity and more referred to as vanity metrics, and placing more of a greater value on the actions and engagements your customers are taking to visit your site. So we talk about this when we create an ideal customer profile for our clients. If you have $1 to spend with a potential customer, what does that customer look like? Or let's put it another way, if you own an automobile dealership, you probably have the staff required to be able to actively work with every single customer who comes in the door. But those customers who come in on a test drive, those are the ones that you should be focusing your attention on, because those are the ones that are most likely to make a purchase. The same principle applies to your website. You focus on the people who are most actively engaged with your site, as opposed to those who are just browsing. Oop. Sorry, wrong button there. So when we talk about measuring engagements, so we mentioned there it was either 10 seconds on your site, or it was taking an action, or it was multiple pages. So in GA4, every action or every inaction in some cases is tracked as an event. So where this differs from Universal Analytics is in that because every action is classified in as event, whether it's a page scroll, whether it's a click, whether it's literally anything. So what that ends up being is that it doesn't require your events to be set up as specific events in GA4 like they were in Universal Analytics. So instead of having to go in and set up your specific criteria to say, if somebody clicks on this link or this ad, I want to count that. For you based on default there. So it ends up creating a lot easier, streamlined process for you. It ends up making your job a lot easier, where you're not having to go in and set all these conversion events up. But that doesn't mean that you're limited only to these default setup within Google Analytics. You can actually create custom events using Google Tag Manager that will allow you to track specific points that you might want to understand. So I've actually got a real world example of this from my previous stop. We had a customer needed to troubleshoot a problem with their landing page. Their landing page was attracting a ton of traffic, but they were getting very little conversions from it. We evaluated the page and we saw it was a lengthy page. The page had a hero image across the top. It had an introductory block of text, and then the form down below it. So all 3 items were sort of stacked on top of each other. So with that as the back, possible solution or possible causes here to 3 different choices. 1 was the form working properly. 2 was the offer compelling enough. And 3, was there some reason that site traffic was not able to even reach or access the form? So within HubSpot, we were able to quickly diagnose and say, okay, it's not a problem with the first thing. The form is working fine. We were able to go in, test the form works great. We thought about the second option, but thought that was a very lengthy process to go in and troubleshoot that. It would do some research as to whether or not the offer was valid. It would require us to go in and actually spend the creative time to fix the offer. It would just be better to skip that one first and examine the page itself and see, is there an issue with the page that is preventing people from the form? And that was something that we figured we could easily dig deeper into. And if it was the problem there, it was an easier fix than a new content document. So we decided, obviously, it was better to identify the third cause. Saying that if the traffic was not seeing the form, that's our fix. If the traffic was seeing the form, then we have to fix the content. So within GA4, we were able to kind of create a custom event to track the scroll depth on the page. How far down the page users scroll. And so we were able to figure out the point on the page at which the hero image started, what point the content ended, and what point the form started, what point was the form submission button at. And figure out these points, and then we put in scroll depth tracking to trigger once each of those points was met, the visitor's use on the page. So what we were able to find then is that visitors weren't actually even seeing the form. They weren't scrolling far enough down the page in order to be able to see the form. So a brief thing, we've actually put this on our website, and you'll see here, we've got a number of pages that we've put this on. So this column here in the middle, inbound marketing, this is actually our homepage. And so we've got 1,200, this is about the past week or so. We've got about 1,200 people that have viewed our homepage in the past week. And you'll see 960, a little bit, but not far enough to hit that 25% trigger. We had 92 hit 25%, 75% got halfway down, 68% got to 75, and 64 people got 90% of the way down the page. Those are percents. Wow. Or those are not percents, those are numbers. So, sorry. So again, with this page as our most effective or most frequently viewed page, you can see traffic will funnel off, because obviously you have to get to 50% in order to reach 75%. But by doing this, we were able to see with our client in this case that, they only had maybe 5% of their traffic was even getting to the submission form. And so we knew nobody's going to be able to convert if they don't even know that there's a form there. So to this was that we were able to revamp their landing page. We moved the hero image. We did a standard 2-column approach with our landing page, copy on the left, form on the right. Almost immediately, we saw a dramatic uptick in the number of form submissions. It was that simple that we didn't have to go in and make changes to the content piece. The content offer was strong, but people didn't know how to get the content offer. So that's a simple. You'll see then that, again, you're not having to go through and make these complicated changes. You're not having to sale investment in a massive switch to your page, simply by using the tools that are available to you to make what's really a relatively easy switch. It took a couple hours worth of work for us to make the change to the site. And, compare that to the amount of time that would be required to change the content offer. It saves the client a ton of, saves our team a ton of money. That's one way of how you can use Google Analytics as a diagnostic tool to help you save some resources. So another way is that you can use Google Analytics to give you behavioral flow tracking. So this is something that is actually currently available in Universal Analytics, but they've streamlined this process and made this a lot easier in GA4. So I've got that set up here. As this takes a minute to load, sorry. Okay, so within Google Analytics, the sessions is your event. So if somebody first logs on to your site, that's considered session start. That's your goal or your event that is triggered. And immediately 6,400 sessions that have started, and it tells you what the next pages are. And simply enough, you can say, okay, so 2,400 people go through this link, where next? So you just simply click on that and it pops up. These are the next steps that these individuals take and the next pages that they're viewing. So in this case, they're actually going and checking out our homepage in this one here for 12. This one here is for industrial. Again, you can click on that and go to the next step. What is the next page that they take after that? You can apply even a ton of different filters to where you can look at individuals who are, sorry, I'm losing my, you can look at this as, I want to see only the people in this region. So if I set my region to exactly matches Wisconsin, come on, come on. We're going to apply and let it reload. And there's my updated map just for the state of Wisconsin. Marketer, and you're trying to understand and you're really targeting a specific geographic area, you can use these to understand the visitor flow. So if you've got a landing page out there, are people following the desired steps that you want? Are they going to the landing page? Are they going to the thank you page? What happens after that? Are they leaving your site? And simply enough, when somebody leaves your site, we're going to try and get to one of these steps here. Come on. Nope, there's Brian. So if I go to this one, it turned gray. I don't know if you guys can see that even on the those watching remotely, but it turned gray. And so what that means is that there is no additional step there. So as simple as you can't go any further because all of those people who clicked on this left the page after that point. But again, this is an example just of how you can understand the visitor and traffic patterns and behaviors that your audience is taking. Come on. So again, there's a number of different apply to that. So if you wanted to see only your paid traffic, your PPC traffic, if you only wanted to see people going to specific, certainly filter in by landing page there. It was one of the things that I didn't do here, but if I were to click on this little pencil, it pulls up all of the pages that you have on your website. And so you can certainly go then and specifically say, I want to, so I'm going to go and reload that. We're going to remove our Wisconsin filter there. Come on. So if I wanted to see here and say, okay, step one, I want to specifically look at this page, and you hit apply, and now that one will show up on there as well as one of your lists. So again, there's a ton of different ways that you don't need to worry necessarily about knowing what specific page you're looking for because they're all built into here. So it makes things, okay. So because this is a HubSpot event, so this change with Google Analytics, how does this affect your reporting in HubSpot? Very simple answer. It has no effect on your reporting in HubSpot at all because HubSpot and Google Analytics are pulling data, but they're pulling into two very different platforms. Google Analytics or HubSpot is not relying on in order to be able to process your reports. So those same reports that you've become accustomed to, you understand how to use, you've become on, those aren't going away. There is no change happening to those pages. So even though Google will not be viewing traffic in terms of sessions, HubSpot reports will still continue to use those. So for the vast majority of our clients, the HubSpot reports are monitoring the overall health of your site and your performance. And that will continue to be the case. That is not going away. You'll still be able to view your total views, as well as traffic by source, including organic traffic, direct, paid, other channels. And most importantly, that HubSpot's tools are able to show you when something isn't looking right. At that point, then you can use your Google Analytics tools to be able why is this not working right? What is broken here that is causing an issue in my reporting? So Google Analytics as a diagnostic tool to be able to dig deeper. So what does all this mean for your planning for 2023 and beyond? Well, a lot of that depends on which platform you've been using for your previous benchmarks. If you've been using HubSpot for your data, you don't need to change anything because HubSpot's reporting is not changing. You'll still be able to set and compare based on historical data. You'll have no issues there. Metrics will continue to be an apples to apples comparison from year over year. However, it is possible that at some point in the future, HubSpot would make the change to more of an event style reporting tool, in which case there's definitely value in making sure your GA4 platform up and running so that you are collecting that data now, as opposed to waiting until that change is made. If you wait until that change is made, so if Google's been your main source of data for setting your KPIs, the earlier you've set up GA4, the better. Without having a full year's worth of data in GA4, you run the risk of not having a full year. You've got a significant gap in setting your established and realistic KPIs. So it's harder to make an informed decision about what to be looking at year over year when you don't have that data. So if you haven't set up your GA4 account, the time to do it was last week. It's worthwhile getting it done now so that you've got that as minimal of a gap as possible. If you haven't, it's worthwhile to use this opportunity to transition your reporting over to HubSpot's metrics, because they're a closer match with what was previously in Universal Analytics. You probably have a better shot of making a better comparison over year. So the terminology is much closer, and the way in which it's processed is a lot closer. So if it sounds like I'm saying there's not value, that's not entirely accurate. For the vast majority of HubSpot users, the reporting capabilities in HubSpot are sufficient. It's helpful in terms of setting and understanding your benchmarks, setting your KPIs. But if you observe your site performance, GA4 is where you're going to see your greatest value. You're going to be able to identify each specific action, understand what is the root cause of it, and be able to diagnose those problems a lot easier. One of the things that GA4 also offers is attribution modeling. So if you aren't sure in which way that a customer, it makes an estimated guess based upon other similar individuals who have come in and made those actions on your site and same types of actions on your site. That's something that is something that I'm just starting to dig into. It was not possible with Universal Analytics. So it's definitely interesting to be able to dive in a little bit more and see if there's a way that you can understand visitor flow a little bit better. But that modeling kind of helps to assign a likely source when you don't know for certain where that individual came from. The other area that Google Analytics offers a tremendous amount of value over HubSpot is in real-time reporting. The ability to action on your site as it occurs. So that's not possible through HubSpot. And so where that ends up helping is if you and say you want to run an A/B test, you can view the results in Google Analytics as that A/B test is processed to see what path are people taking. Are they following the right steps that we have set out for this conversion event, or are they going off and doing something that we don't intend for them to do? In which case you can hopefully jump in and make those changes to before the bulk of those emails that A/B test go out. So that value based on that real-time reporting is immensely helpful, as opposed to sending it out and waiting the next day and then realizing that your data is not what you hoped it was because you didn't have it up correctly. So there's a very strong value there in terms of real-time reporting. But just another tool to help you make the best and most informed decisions for your business. The worst thing that we can do is just make guesses based upon hunches. And the more data that we acquire, the more information, the better we can make decisions moving forward that are going to be more successful for our business. So with that, open up the floor to any questions. Please.
Events in GA before transitioning to GA4, and you're using some of those built-in events. Are they going to duplicate in GA4?
As long as they're set up within Tag Manager, I believe that there's just a little bit of that needs to be added to make sure that they're reporting to the correct tracking code. So with Universal Analytics, your tracking code starts UA dash strings and numbers. If they're overlapping, you should be just fine. Yes. So that's the other part of it too, is with your analytics, the tracking code is UA dash a 7 or 8 strings of numbers. Our tracking code is G dash string of numbers, and they're not the same strings of numbers. So that's part of where you have to make sure that your site is set up and processing the data correctly. Yep. So the question there, sorry, was if you've set up your question or your goals in Google Tag Manager with Universal Analytics, do they carry over? And they do carry over as long as you've set them up to report to both Universal Analytics and GA4. If they're not set up to one or the other, they won't transfer over. Great question. Other questions?
Kevin, I just want to make sure that I got this clear. So even if you don't have intention for using GA4 right now, you don't have a need for it, you would still want to go in and set up the tracking so that at some point in the future, when you do need it, you have data. Because if you don't do that and then all of a sudden something breaks or you're trying to understand something, you have no way, Google doesn't allow you to go, you don't have it set up in the first place. Right?
That is correct, yes. You cannot reverse engineer your data. We encountered that as we were setting up some of the things. Keith's question here was about the being able to reestablish your data if something happens. So if you don't have GA4 installed, something breaks on your site, can you go back and get the historical data afterwards? The answer is no. If it's not set up, it is not collecting data, and it's not helping you in your site at any point. So as I was saying, we ran into that when we were setting up a couple of my examples where back a couple extra days, it looks weird because it wasn't set up right. I go in and tweak it a little bit and make it look, make it fit that what we were needing. So yeah, it's gets a little bit tricky if you don't have it set up properly. You need to make sure that it's set and it's collecting data and reporting correctly on what your site is actually doing.
How complex is it to set it up?
It's incredibly easy to set up. In terms of getting the question there was how hard is it or how complex is it to set up? It's very easy. If you actually have HubSpot, it's incredibly easy because there is an integration within HubSpot to simply just drop your tracking code in. That is actually a relatively new feature that HubSpot rolled out once. They allowed that default block for the Google Analytics 4 tracking code. It literally takes up about 10 minutes to get set up. It's setting up a new account or whatever within GA4, taking your tracking code, dropping it into HubSpot, and you're done. As far as collecting the custom events and things like that, that tends to get a little bit more complicated. But if you're just mainly you're collecting data and you're able to process and understand what you've got, very little problem at all.
We don't have any questions in the online chat, but just a bit of housekeeping. Somebody asked if we would be sending out the recording, and we will. We'll send out a PDF of the slides and the video recording. And actually, Crayons from our team just dropped a question for you, Kevin. She's wondering if you need a developer to do what you were talking about with setting it up.
So, to set it up. The short version of that is no, you don't need a developer to set up the base tracking of Google Analytics 4. If you do want to start doing some of the more advanced tools, such as the scroll tracking that we were showing, yes, it is certainly possible to do on your own. I did it myself, and
So I've got the receding hairline. Pulling too much of my own hair out. So no, it's very complicated. It is something that you can find resources online to do. But again, it's a lot of trial and error, and it's frustrating. It kind of leads you to the point of saying, you know what, this is, but certainly it would be much more beneficial to set that up.
So it's actually a really good question there, Frank. So when you go into your, it does look a lot different in here now. The event section is actually, why are you driving me crazy? So events can literally be anything. So if I go into this engagement section in the events, page event, session start, scroll. So this entire link, this entire list here, sorry, is a listing of box actions that people can take. So link clicks, clicking on specifically is an out of the box function. If they've scrolled, that's where this scroll is at. If it's their first visit on your site. So it's a lot of that same sort of information that was contained within Universal Analytics, but it's just now being represented more as an action step as opposed to a behavior. Eric?
So you said around June 1st, depending on.
Yeah.
What if I don't set up GA4 and I don't put the tracking code in my website? What happens in June?
Your Universal Analytics account will contain all of the historical data that is contained from when it was created until June or July 1st. After that point, you will collect no more new data on Universal Analytics, and you will collect no information on GA4 until you get that set up. So you will have a definite gap in your reporting at that point. It's obviously best to do it before then. Any other questions?
Any housekeeping, Mary, for the HUG crew? We got about,
Nope, I will send out the email probably tomorrow with the recording and the PDF of the slides.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you guys coming. Appreciate everybody coming online and listening. And I hope this is helpful. And if at any point there's questions or whatever, don't be afraid to reach out. We're happy to help.
Thanks, Kevin.